Got it.
Do I need to have something pulled up? YouTube something?
No. You don't need to have anything pulled up. I just got a whole mess in front of me controlling all
You
this
got the
crap.
whole control panel, mission control
Yeah.
over there?
Yeah. Look at you. You look beautiful on it. Good deal. Okay. Hello again. As everybody knows, I am Eli, the computer guy. This is another Tech Office Hours. Basically, the idea with Tech Office Hours is everybody's running around trying to get education and certifications, but they have no idea what they should get certified in. They have no idea what's going on in the tech industry. So my idea is, hey, let's do Zoom meetings with people all around the world and actually have a conversation and discuss. Like when you say, I want to get certified in cloud, that kind of thing. Like, what the hell does that actually mean? So if you want to, this is a meetup. If you want to join the meetup, you can go to Tech Office Hours to join the meetup. There's also a Zoom link down in the doobly-doo if you want to join this thing. And yeah, so basically we'll spend like the first hour or so talking with Tomer here about being a real digital nomad, since a lot of you folks out there keeps explaining how you hate people. I love how like people come on the show and they're like, Eli, I fucking hate people. How can I have a job without people? So we'll see if the digital nomad thing
Exhibit
is
A.
true. So let me just do the security thing. So yep. Okay, good deal. So yeah, thanks for being here, Tomer. How's it going? You? Yes, talk, yes. Oh, you got muted. Oh, how did you get mute? Ask to unmute. Did you mute yourself?
I muted for a second. I had to cough. I like to keep that to myself and not necessarily share that.
This is ridiculous. Where's your mask, man? Where's your mask?
Yeah, that's why
So
we're doing this through the camera, right?
yeah. But now I think you're supposed to have like 3 masks when you talk on a camera. I think that's how it's supposed to be.
I should have installed the antivirus ahead of time.
There,
Sorry about that.
there you go. So yeah, so you are on the show. I wanted to have you on the show because you actually did the real digital nomad thing. You were like literally in what, Barcelona when you and your wife got COVID and
we
had to come
we were
back.
in Madrid, yeah, like
Oh
heart
my
of
god.
Madrid, like March 2020. One day everyone's on about, the next, literally, streets are entirely quiet. It was surreal. I mean, it was like zombie apocalypse. I'm sure everyone experienced something similar, but it was just weird being in such a touristy, like, populated city, and then just one day to the next, 100 to 0 overnight. Yeah.
Really? So yeah. So what was it? So how quickly did things fall apart over there? Like when did it go from we're in Madrid to oh fuck, how the hell do we get home?
Yeah, so we, obviously news was trickling, and we were at a meetup at one point, and someone had, so we went to these meetups to be social and try and maintain some semblance of a social life, and someone pulled up an article that said there was like a first case in Madrid, and we look around, we're like in a crowded pub, everyone's drinking, everyone is way closer to one another than 6 feet, and this was before 6 feet was a thing. And we looked at each other and said, should we be here right now? It went downhill pretty quickly from there. I remember they advertised the night they publicized, all right, after Saturday, everyone like kind of stay in your house except for like groceries. And so Saturday we kind of took advantage. We just sat in the park for most of the day, bottle of wine, as one does in Madrid, and kind of just soaked it in for the last semblance of freedom. It wasn't as of yet like huge in the sense that like we had still planned. We actually had tickets and we had a place to stay in Berlin after Spain, after Madrid. We were still really looking forward to that, and that's when like the border started shutting down. We said, we should probably go somewhere where we're allowed to live without worrying about visas. And that's kind of when we're like, all right, we should maybe think about wrapping this up here. Cut a bit short. Yeah.
Wow. So how hard was it to get back in the U.S.? Had the planes stopped yet, or what was the time for it now?
It wasn't that difficult. We flew via Miami, and it was I was going through the airport, I was a bit giddy because the airport was entirely empty. The plane was empty. Like we could have each had like a whole section of the plane to ourselves. On like a massive international flight, we go through the airport in Miami, and like no line. Like we were pretty much the only people in customs, and like before that, we had spent a lot of times at airports, and so seeing no line was amazing to me. Obviously, it's not a good thing, but at the time, made me a bit happy to just know that there was no line. It wasn't that difficult. It was just kind of one of those surreal moments where, like, yeah, you're walking through an empty Miami airport, which is typically extremely busy. So, yeah.
Wow. So with at that time period, so you're out of the country, and back in that time period, everybody thought we were being led by an insane person. Did you think about staying outside? Well, because like it's really weird. Like the idea of whether or not the U.S. is doing good or whether the U.S. is doing bad, kind of was on a pendulum. So at that point, everybody thought we were doing pretty damn bad. So did you think about just camping out somewhere else in the world, like not coming back to the U.S.?
I don't think that occurred. But since the borders were closing, we like to not play it risky with the visa situation for us. So, for example, my now wife, then fiance, her name's Michelle. She is Scottish. She was then, and she still is. She was Scottish, and I am Israeli originally, and so we each had passports that didn't overlap except for the U.S. We were trying to not, this was a new thing for everyone, and so we were trying to play it safe and let's just go back to the U.S. When this blows over, we'll figure out, what's next kind of deal. Obviously we know where that ended up, but yeah.
Did you, if you had the Israeli passport, like, because they, at least for a long time, they did. I don't know what the hell's going on with them now. At least for a long time, they did well. Did you think about just booking it to? Because if you can do that way, you can be out to cafes and dance clubs and do all that kind of stuff.
Just show the passport app, you're good to go. We had planned on visiting Israel again. We had during our trip, but again, it's one of those where Michelle wasn't allowed to. If she is in Israel, she was a tourist, and so she can only be there for so long. And so for us, it was just kind of all right. Let's go home to the U.S. and take a beat for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So you guys actually got COVID, right?
We got COVID. So this was again March 2020. We did a trip to Toledo, which was beautiful, fun little weekend 3-day trip. It was one of those where Michelle started feeling not great. She said, "Oh, I have coronavirus. I'm like, "No, you don't. You have allergies. You have a cold. You have something." Then I started feeling pretty exhausted for a couple of days. Then Michelle lost her sense of smell and taste. We're like, okay, this might be real. Yeah. So at that point, that was when news was just coming out, where that was one of the symptoms. There's lots of taste and smell. So that was a bit hard to argue against. We got back here last summer. I think it was July or something. We did an antibody test, and I came up positive for antibodies. So that's what it was, indeed.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. So when did you guys start traveling then? When was that?
So we left the United States October 25th, I believe, 2018. So we're coming up on 3 years of leaving. This was a good couple months in the planning. In my head, years of formulating and scheming, as it were. We left and we were on the road, well, until March 2020, right? So just about 17, 18 months. We had planned to go through September or October of 2020. We had planned to do like a nice 2 years. So it got cut short by 6 months. I'm not complaining in the way of how COVID hit people. We were some of the luckier ones, I think. Our world traveling got cut short, okay, that's fine. People have other problems. But yeah, so we were on the road for about 18 months.
That's cool. Once all this settles out, do you think you go back on the road again, or you settle down?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we first settled in, we definitely kept that as an open possibility. Again, no one really knew how long we'd have to hunker down. And we definitely kept that as a possibility. But over time, uh, we settled in Asheville, North Carolina, as you know. But we kind of started really falling in love with Asheville and kind of trading in the suitcase for some roots, if you will. So over time, we got an Airbnb, we extended. We found a sublease for the summer. After that, we signed a 1 year lease. We got a dog, so that kind of ties you down a good little bit. We went from zero to domestic pretty quickly after that. So yeah.
That's cool. So where are all the places that you went? So you were out for 18 months. So where all did you go to?
Yeah, we did a lot of Europe. As I mentioned, Michelle and I both have some international background. So we visited our homes a few times. We were in Glasgow, Scotland. Michelle has some family there, and we were in Israel a couple times. I have family there, and so we're very comfortable with Europe. Um, uh, Israel isn't technically in Europe, but it has a lot of European influence. So we did places like Croatia. We were in Split, which is a beautiful beach town. We did Belgrade, Serbia, which is one of those where you don't think much of it, but we were just amazed by it. We were in Berlin. We were in the Netherlands. Michelle had previously worked, lived, and studied there, so she had some people that we were able to visit. I'm sure I'm missing things. So that was, so a good bit of Europe. And then we kind of went a bit south. So we were in Morocco, and then we did South Africa, and then we kind of went. So we went east. We did Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, Australia, and then kind of back around. So yeah, it was amazing. Wouldn't give it up for anything, especially knowing now, that uh, the same kind of travel is not. It's very different nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. So how long did you guys spend in all those places? Because again, my wife and I, we travel a lot, and
Right.
there's this idea of like, oh, we'll bounce here for 2 days and here for 2 days. And people don't realize how freaking exhausting travel. And so now it's like we're gonna go here for a month or maybe two. We'll go here for. How long were
Yeah.
you guys staying around in these places?
Yeah. You're exactly right. That's exactly the term that comes to my mind when I think like hopping around. Exhausting. You know, every leg is overhead, and so that's exactly what we did. Is a cadence of 1 month, just about 1 month per place, is what we found was pretty nice, and we kind of came to that. Yeah, it's a nice round number. But if you go, we stayed mostly at Airbnbs because it was easy. You didn't have to furnish apartment. You already had utilities set up. You had a kitchen. You didn't have to eat out all the time. And on Airbnb, if you book a place for 28 days or longer, then you get a large discount.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what made us settle. Like, okay, cool. This is what we're gonna do. So, and we also like, I feel like there's a lot of maybe falsehoods kind of or assumptions made about the digital nomad lifestyle. Like, oh yeah, we just up and left one day and by the seat of our pants, and like there was a lot of planning that we had to do. Because you book an Airbnb for a month straight, we found it best to plan it ahead of time, right? Because if you're looking for something for next week, if there's a single day booked at an Airbnb, you can't book a month straight. So all of a sudden you lost out on the discount. You don't know where a roof over your head is coming from. So for us, it was a lot of planning ahead. We typically had about 4 to 6 months planned ahead of time, in the way of like where we were going, flights, and Airbnb. Once we were at the place, we didn't have so many plans, but like in terms of where we were going, it wasn't so easy to just like, oh, we met some people, they're going, to Ibiza. Let's just go. Like, it wasn't quite like that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So, did you have any issues with is with Airbnb, does that just function everywhere around the world about the same? Was there any weird issues with that?
Uh, it worked out really well for us. Really, really well. We had one hiccup, I think, where I think it was in the Netherlands where someone pulled out. We had booked a place, someone pulled out, 3, 4 days before. And again, for us, we liked planning a couple months in advance. So that was stressed us out, to say the least. They were not super helpful at first in trying to resolve the situation, but I kind of flexed a bit and said, like, we've been very loyal customers of yours. Take a look at our history and help us out. And he saw that, like, literally for the past year, we've only stayed at Airbnb and just gave, like, pretty much our entire rent went to Airbnb for a year. And he said, okay, cool. Here's some money and find like a different hotel or something. And so that's what we ended up doing. That thankfully was a shorter term rental. I think in the Netherlands, we hopped around a bit. So it wasn't a full month. So that was good. But, besides that, pretty good. I think they've also only gotten better. At the time, for us, I'm sure we'll get to talking about like actually working on the road, but for us, Wi-Fi was really important. And so a lot of times people didn't list the Wi-Fi speed. And so we tried to message host a lot of time. Can you go to fast.com and send us a screenshot, whatever? I think Airbnb now has a feature where hosts can actually, it's like like an attribute of the post of like, this is the internet speed at this Airbnb.
Oh, that works. So,
Yeah.
for what you do as a coder, like what speed do you actually need? Like, what's the bare minimum that you need to work?
That's a good question. It depends. So like, if I'm actually like coding, not a lot, right? A lot of the stuff I'm doing is local. I compile things locally, but the thing is, I still work for a company. I work for a company, and so we have meetings. We have Zoom meetings. I like to keep my video. I like to turn my video on when possible, especially when I'm talking to my team or pair programming or something. It's like, to me, a sign of like engagement and like a tiny bit of respect of like, I'm here, I'm with you. That wasn't always possible. Morocco internet was not great. India internet was not great. So so yeah, there in most places I had video meetings, and so you want a decent pipe, decent bandwidth to be able to host that without it becoming too annoying.
Yeah. So, did you run into like any oh crap moments? Like when I was on the road, I had to upload videos. There were just times where I was just in black spots. Did you get to India and just realize you couldn't do something that you were supposed to do with your job?
uh, yeah, there's definitely been cases like that. I'm trying to think. Like Sri Lanka they just had this happened in India as well. Of like, they just had the power go out in the middle of the day. The infrastructure just was not great, and so the people there, it was amazing. I was at a co-working spot in Sri Lanka, middle of the day, power goes out, and at the co-working spot, like they had a couple bean bags, and like a guy just walks over to a bean bag, puts his hat down, and just naps. That power's out. What are you gonna do? Work is a bit of hiatus, and so that definitely happened where I like, all right, power's out. I guess I'm done working for the next little bit, right? That's definitely happened, yeah. And my team was pretty understanding. Again, there was a lot of trust back and forth, and so I don't think there was ever, they ever felt some kind of way or ill will towards them.
What about like your boss though? Did your boss ever start to get a little frustrated, a little bit like, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this? No?
I gotta say, like, he was one of the more supportive people, actually. I think I really lucked out. He's the one who also like kind of helped push for it a tiny bit. And so it's not like that kind of antiquated mindset of like butts and seats is the only way work gets done, obviously, right? Again, he was very trustworthy and kind of helped me, even vouched for me upstairs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So then, so if you had meetings and all that, because a lot of times when I think about digital nomad, I kind of think about what I did, where I didn't have to respond to anybody. I just uploaded crap and got paid. But you had meetings, and so Israel, Europe, that's a few hours off. That's a bit of a pain in the butt. But Sri Lanka and India is 12 hours. I mean,
I
that's
think
a long
nine
way
and a
off.
half,
Nine and a
but
half.
Thailand is 12 hours though, and
Okay,
Australia is like 15 or something. You're like on the other side of the clock, like it's crazy.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, it was kind of interesting. The first stint of our trip kind of was a lot of Europe, and so it ranged from, if you're in like Portugal or UK, it's 5 hours ahead, and then Israel 7 hours ahead, so five, six, seven. Those time zones worked great for me because what happened was, you know, I could get a bit of a later start if I wanted to. Sometimes manage to even squeeze in like a workout in the morning, but then plugged in, and I kind of had the rest of the morning to myself, to, like no distractions. No one was pinging me. Once I caught up on email, there were no more emails coming through. And so I really just was able to like put my head down and get some work done. Uh, you know, go out to a nice lunch. And then after lunch was morning. So I was on the East Coast. My team was on East Coast. So, after lunch is like morning on East Coast. And then we did a stand up. So I was able to I was able to talk about what I did earlier that day. And so we had like half a day overlap. And then when my team on the East Coast went out for lunch, that's when my day kind of ended. It was a very cool, I like to term it, to trademark it, relay development. What we did is, if we were working on a story, during that middle piece of the day, we'd be able to pair programs, share a screen, um, you know, take turns. And then when after I signed off, they kept the story going. They'd send me kind of like an end of day status update. And then I'd get that in the morning and I'd be able to continue with that story while they were still sleeping. So it was kind of like always people were working on it. Now, you're absolutely right in that once we started going further and further east, all of a sudden this became a bit more of a problem. And so what had happened was, I just ended up working later. I just shifted my day so I would have that same schedule of, I'll have about half my day done at stand up, and I will exit mostly like I'll exit mostly at when my team goes to lunch. So yeah, like India and Sri Lanka ended up with like me coming back home like after 9:30 because my team left for lunch at noon. Uh, Thailand, there were nights that I worked until midnight because that's when my team worked. Now the thing is, on the flip side of that, my morning was totally free. So if we wanted to go out and like do an excursion or go see some sites, or go out and explore about the town, my mornings were free. I didn't need to start working until about 1 p.m. or something. And so that was kind of cool. It was a challenge for sure. But again, it was a bit of that trust that we had with the team, and it kind of helped keep it going.
Huh. So that's one thing, because I come from the IT world. We don't have nearly as many meetings. It's weird. I've now been hanging out with these coders. Oh my God. I thought sitting at a keyboard all day sucked. You guys are in so damn many meetings. Like, is that actually normal nowadays?
uh, Good question. I think that like at the company that I was at while we were traveling, um, we had a stand up a day, and then we probably had about 4 or 5 or so other meetings throughout the week. Now, I think they did a really good job of shielding us from unnecessary meetings, which was good, obviously, for me, and productivity of the team. And currently, where I'm at, I'm no longer at that company. Currently, I have even less. We have like officially like Tuesday and Wednesday are official no meeting days. So it's just, put your head down and work. I think there's a lot of companies that took on Agile and Scrum, right? There's a lot of these ceremonies that they do. So there's a daily stand up, there's a grooming, there's a demo, there's a retro. So, uh, there are a lot of those meetings that I think are good if they're run well and they actually do help. But yeah, sometimes it can be a bit much for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean that's what you're saying. Because you're saying what you're talking about, like 10. So if you're 4 to 5 plus your other one, that's like 10 meetings a week. I would lose my damn mind if you put me through 10 meetings a week.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like that's true. I mean, you're used to. I mean, yeah, you probably have a nice solo time, like breezing through. I guess, right?
Yeah, well, like
uh,
it's for IT, like I say, we either get work orders or we have our project, and we
uh,
just we just sit there and just plug the fuck away until you get done, and like,
right,
hey, what else can I do? And plug away. Yeah, so
right, right. Yeah, yeah. So I guess like the company that I was at while we were traveling, they're very collaborative. So to me, the stand-ups were easy. 15 minute. This is what I'm doing. I'm not blocked. Let's keep going, kind of deal. Uh, yeah. Again, it's one of those collaborative environments where if I were to be, I don't know, if I were to be freelancing, I don't know, would I not have more meetings trying to appease clients directly instead of scrum masters and product owners? I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. So how long did you work with the company before you started doing the Nomad thing?
Yeah, so I was working, it actually worked out kind of nice because I was working for that company for 18 months before we left. And so this is actually kind of a funny story. I was working for them for about 15 months at the time. So, and we had booked our tickets. We're like, all right, we're going end October. We got the tickets. This is happening. And I decided it was best to tell my manager, one up face to face, people were in the office back then, face to face, tell them, look, we're leaving. And my plan was to try and freelance. I had one or two freelance clients at the time. I'd done it before, not full time, but I figured, if I try to take that on, then I might be able to sustain a vocation. And so I went to my manager 3 months before we were leaving. I said, look, it's not you, it's me. We're going on this trip, and I just want to let you know that I'll help with the transition. It's not like I got an offer and I'm going somewhere else. It's just that we're going to be traveling and I'm going to be freelancing. He came back to me the next day and said, hey, you could stay and work remote. And I said, yes, please. I didn't even think that was an option back then. They were kind of, the company as a whole is pretty old and private, and I just didn't really think that that was an option. It's funny looking back on it at the time. I was kind of twisting my manager's arm in a sense, because for them to replace me would have been much more expensive than for them to uh, you know, give me a tiny bit of trust and see if it would work while we were on the road. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it actually ended up working great. So I was with the company for 15 months. I had climbed from entry level senior software engineer to senior software engineer. I was kind of a bit of a lead on the team. I had taken on initiatives and delivered. And so I had shown, a few times that I'm someone who could be trusted and who can manage their time and deliver. And so that's kind of why they extended the offer of like, all right, you could do this, and just keep doing what you're doing. Keep us, be sure to communicate well, and go ahead, go for it.
Wow, that's a hell of a thing. So,
Yeah.
doing the digital nomad deal, though, so you were with them 18 months. Do you think it would have been as successful if you were a relatively new hire? Was there trust and communication that was built up when you were face to face that then transferred to the nomad thing?
Yeah, I think when this was October 2018 when we left, and I think that being in person was massive for this, right? I was with the same team for 18 months on the company. I had the same manager for 18 months. I worked with the same people for 18 months in person. We had work from home days, whatever, but we were mostly in the office. And I think that built a lot of trust back and forth. And I think that's a main reason why I did have the flexibility that I did while traveling, right? So the whole idea of like going further east and like, sure, some days maybe I took off, or some days like I said, all right, I'm gonna cut off at this time because that's like a reasonable hour here kind of deal. So there was a lot of that trust. Now, again, that was a different world than it is today, right? Today, a lot of companies are remote by default, if not by sort of arm twisting, right? Right today, it's even if you don't want to be remote, you're remote. Um, and so I think that for companies that are used to being in person and that were in person and that want to go back to being in person, I think that's a tough sell of, hey, I'm a new guy, I'm the new person on the team, I'm gonna go travel and we'll see where I am when you call people back to the office. I think that's a bit more of a tough sell as opposed to now there are a lot of companies that are saying, yeah, we're gonna stick to being remote. There, I think it's a bit more appropriate, a bit easier to say, okay, like, I'm gonna be traveling, I'm gonna deliver, and since you don't need me back in an office, whatever.
Oh. So with your team, like when we talk about things like digital nomad, how many people can actually do this? Like everybody's like, I want to be a digital nomad. What if your entire team just booked off to Europe? Would that actually function?
uh, that's funny. I think that's a very relevant question again because today's world remote is ubiquitous. You know, I think there takes uh, I think it takes a lot of self management and time management and this word keeps coming up, right? But trust within a team and probably within a company even a bit as well, in the way of like, you know, we don't have to be on the same time zone. We don't have to like talk to one another constantly, but I'm going to take a story. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to do this to the best of my abilities. If I have questions, I'll ask and, kind of take it from there.
Interesting. So when you guys took off, how did health insurance work in all these places since you're gone for that long?
Yeah, that's that's one of those things that I don't know if we ever did entirely right. We had health insurance here in the U.S., and what we did was we bought health insurance. We bought travel insurance, where it was like, in the worst of worst case scenarios, they'll fly you to the U.S. and then in the U.S. You do your thing, kind of deal. And so we had that for the entire duration. So we kept the insurance in the U.S. and then just had that extra travel insurance on top.
Was that too bad? I know back in the day when I was doing like Europe and India, I didn't
Mhm.
have it because it was brutally expensive. Is it still brutally
Yeah.
expensive, or did the price come down?
No. No. It wasn't that expensive. Like just the travel part you're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, that was. I forget exactly what it was, but I wasn't. Didn't get sticker shock or anything. I think it was pretty reasonable.
yeah. Oh, okay. And so
Yeah.
you guys take off, and so how many suitcases do you have? Like, so what do you take along with you when you become a nomad?
Yeah, that is a great question. We were trying to be very, we were trying to travel as light as possible. We had a single suitcase and two backpacks.
Hmm?
I don't know how we did it. We had like one of the big ones. Like we got one on Amazon, which worked beautifully. Actually, it was like orange, so you see it from a mile away, and hard shell. We have a blog. We wrote a couple posts, and it's on there. But we so what is it? We each had one side suitcase, right? So we each kind of tried to pack like a closet. It was tough with the changing of the seasons too. So like
Mhm.
it's funny when we left, we took some winter coats, and then what would happen is like we would just carry those with us on the flight from place to place, and then we met some family the following March in Budapest, and then we gave them our coats. Like they came to visit Budapest and went back home. We said, "Hey, take these coats. It's coming up on summer. We don't need this anymore." It was a lot of balancing like that. We managed to get away with one suitcase. It was Don't get me wrong, it was a heavy suitcase. It was a heavy one. There were times when like I think there was like one or two times where we actually had to pay because it was like over, what is it, 50 pounds or whatever. Uh, yeah. Um, but we made it work. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And when you're traveling around, so when I traveled and did the hostel thing, one of the great parts is it was really easy to meet people. If you're doing Airbnbs, that's a lot more isolating, though. Did you make friends on the road, or were you kind of isolated?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you were traveling, though, you were also solo, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's that's to me, that's the difference, right? Is like because I did a bit of solo travel back in the day, a couple years back. Like I did like a little Europe stint as well. And then you're right. That's hostels is amazing for just that purpose. You know, this was a bit more of like I call it like travel as a lifestyle. You know, to go back to the uh, to the top of the hour here. You know, um, more so than like digital nomad traveling. I call it travel as a lifestyle because it was something that we wanted to do long term. And so the thing about the hostel life is, you know, going back to what you were saying earlier, is it could be exhausting because it's great. It's a great way to meet people. You know, if you're going to be in a city for like a week or a couple of days, and then on to the next one, and you don't know anyone, and you're looking to have a good time and meet people, hostel is absolutely the way to go. You know, if you're traveling with your then girlfriend, you know at some point is going to be your wife. Um, you're trying to like explore different cultures and countries and places. For us, it was a bit of that slow travel where we did Airbnb, which gave us kind of space, a kitchen, as I mentioned earlier, but like, just a bit of a space of our own kind of temporary home, however temporary it may be. Now, talking to uh, the social life, right? It was not, it wasn't like a hostel where you like walk down the hall, knock on some doors, and say, "Hey, what's going on tonight?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we did is we leveraged meetup.com actually, and as well as couch surfing meetups. I think both of those have changed dramatically again since the pandemic because I think they're both a bit pay to play. I think couch surfing meetups are at least. And so what we did is, at each place that we were at, we would look up. They had a lot of weekly, excuse me, just like weekly get-togethers, weekly socials. And so you just go to like, Belgrade social. Just look that up on Meetup and Couchsurfing Meetup. There's typically a weekly one happening in a lot of the big cities. Again, pre-COVID, and it was a mix of locals, expats, travelers. It was a bit hit or miss. Don't get me wrong; it depends on the week and where you're going, but it means you get to see new bars along the way. We definitely met some really cool people through that, and got along. So we met people that we then kept in touch with, at least for the duration of our stay there. We also had plans to meet people again, a second time around when we were coming back to Europe. That got cut short, so it goes. But that kind of helped keep us a bit socially active, and our brains kind of going socially in that way.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And then your visas. So, what the hell visas did you guys have? Did you just guys have tourist visas?
Yeah, this is
Yeah, okay.
yeah, this is the part where we kind of looked the other way when it came to the legality of some of this. Unfortunately, it's interesting because the world isn't really set up for this type of travel. It's not. So what we ended up doing was, yeah, we did exactly that. Is we got tourist visas. Um, Michelle was a European citizen. She's a British citizen, so she was European at the time. Uh, and so for her, travel within Europe was easy. And we just did tourist visas. So within Europe, there's the Schengen area, so you could be within certain countries 90 days out of 180 days, right? So 3 months out of 6, and then you can kind of hop in and out. So like Croatia wasn't in the Schengen area. They might be, or they might soon be. Serbia is not. So you kind of hop in and out. We don't feel great about this, to be honest. We were on tourist visas, and we were not explicitly tourists. We were working. I wish that there were a better way for us to have done this in the past. What helped make us feel a bit more at ease is like we paid the tourist tax in a lot of places. So when it came time to like negotiating or like haggling or something like that, or people see tourists who don't speak the local language and bump up the price a tiny bit, we were happy to do it and at least give a bit of that money back to the local economy. At least that helped us maybe that's just what we tell ourselves, but it made us feel a bit better deep inside. The other thing I'll say about this is actually the pandemic has made this a lot more plausible recently, because there are a lot of countries now that are actually introducing digital nomad visas explicitly. Yeah. So you can apply. I saw a list the other day, but Thailand, Indonesia, Estonia. There's a lot of countries that are introducing visas that are for digital nomads. And so what it is you typically have to apply. You show either like a certain bank account balance or a certain monthly income, just to make sure that you're like at a certain level that you can contribute to their economy. And then you're able to go there. Some of them are 3 months, 6 months, some of them are even a year or more, where you could be in their country legally, travel within it, work, do whatever you want. And it isn't an actual tourist visa. I wish that were available to us at the time, but it's one of those things where COVID has shed light on the fact that this is really possible. And so a lot of countries are kind of capitalizing on this moment and saying, come here, come work here. We want your business. We want smart people who work in tech and who do good things, not only in tech, but who do good things. We want you here. Come apply to this visa, and then you can stay here without worrying about us knocking on your door.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're saying that was kind of like a throwaway question. I kind of thought, but you actually you were worried about it. Like, why were you worried they were going to knock on your damn door? I mean, like, that's kind of curious.
It's not like it actually kept us up. Like, oh, they're going to knock on our door. It's just it is something that we wanted to feel good about what we were doing to some extent, to whatever extent we could. And so I didn't want to necessarily take advantage of these companies, countries. But so that's kind of, it's something that we've definitely thought about. You know what I mean? Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
So then for tax purposes and all that, did you guys just use a parent's address, or what did you use as a permanent address while you're doing this?
Yeah. So we used, we each kept our like parents' address back in the States. So like all our official mail, shout out to my mom for helping maintain getting my mail for years and years, and helping make sure that she could toss away the spam and not toss away what's important. So like on paper, Michelle and I have lived together not all that long, when in reality for a year and a half of that, we were traveling just in random Airbnbs, living together, just, yeah.
That's fair. And so with all the stuff that you packed, what kind of computer, like what kind of systems did you take with you to do your work?
There it is. I took my work machine. Yeah. It was a MacBook Pro. It was like the 16-inch. It was the one before like the separate escape button.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The one, I think it was the one before the touch bar. I think I had like the actual, like the physical keys for the function keys. It worked well. I obviously needed it to work. My personal machine, I have a MacBook Pro that's much older, and that would not be my main vocation was my work anyway. So that was my main machine. I had a wireless Apple keyboard and a wireless mouse, and I had I think it's called like a Roost laptop stand.
Oh,
So it kind of
yeah.
sits it up to kind of help you sit up straight, and then that's why you need the wireless mouse and keyboard. I had that set up, and then I had AirPods, the original AirPods, worked pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So then, when you're traveling around, especially being American, European, and Israeli, like everybody in the U.S. is scared crapless about safety concerns that you're all going to get kidnapped. Out of a year and a half, 18 months, did you have any real safety issues in all those places?
Not really. To be honest, not really. Not really. We had one. So like we were in Morocco for about 3 weeks. I think that time it was a bit shorter than a month. That to me, it didn't feel unsafe, but I was Israeli in Morocco, and it didn't. Maybe that was the part where I felt most uncomfortable. That's also where Michelle had said that there were some times where if she was walking alone, she felt like eyes constantly staring at her. Nothing happened, but it was interesting because apparently when I was with her, no one would look, because in that culture, she's mine. You know what I mean? Where obviously that's not true, but in that culture, if she's walking alone, everyone is staring. But if I'm with her, I didn't even know that this happened, because whenever I was there, I never saw it. Yeah, so that'd be like the main case where it didn't feel entirely safe, I think.
Okay.
But
And then, like, you talk about being Israeli, it's kind of interesting. Like, I don't know. Do you look Israeli? Like, do people know? Like, it is kind of interesting to think about. Like, when you're traveling, was it just they tracked your passport, or do you look Israeli? I don't know.
yeah, no, you're you're right. I think it didn't. I think in that situation, Morocco is probably mostly in my head, to be honest. Only places we showed our passport, obviously at the airports, and I think when you check into an Airbnb, a lot of times they ask for it. Even then, I showed my U.S. passport, and then it wasn't a big deal. It just says that I was born in Israel, and I don't know how much people pay attention to that, to be honest. Yeah, maybe it was just mostly in my head.
Uh-huh. Well, that's a. Do you run into any other weird isms like being an American, Israeli, or Europe? Because I think about that, like talking about India. So when I backpacked through India, there was a real issue with Israelis, and it's important. It's not Jews; it's Israelis, and the reason is at least at that time, a lot of crap was going on in Israel, and so all the young people that were getting out of military service, the closest place
Yeah.
that was safe was India. And unfortunately, you get people right out of the military going to drink it off. And there were a lot of
Yes.
weird shit that has, again, not anti-Semitism. It was Israel. And like, did you run into any kind of weird stuff like that you weren't expecting? Like any kind of weird issues?
It's funny because I do know what you're talking about. There are towns in India. They go to a lot to Sri Lanka as well. Actually, there are like towns and restaurants that literally have menus in Hebrew because so many Israelis go through there. They don't speak. They don't speak. They don't know the language. They just have menus in Hebrew. I don't think I came across much weirdness in that sort of way. Yeah,
Yeah. Cool.
yeah.
And then,
Kind of easy.
yeah, good deal. And so, okay, so you guys get COVID, you got to come back. Why Asheville of all places? Why show up here?
Yeah, good question. So both Michelle and we were raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is about 3.5 hours east of Asheville. We've both been to Asheville a few times for trips. Asheville is a nice go-to spot to vacation and to check out. So we've both been here a couple times. It's funny too, because I remember on a couple of my visits, I always said, I really like the mountains. I think I would fit pretty well if I lived here. And I never kind of envisioned it really until I was here. But Michelle's sister lived here at the time, and we were looking for cheap Airbnbs again. So we were kind of in a bit of a scramble to get back to the U.S. and make sure that we had a place to live for a bit. And so we just looked up Airbnbs across a broad scope of across a broad geographic area, and there was one in Asheville that looked nice and relatively cheap. And we said, yeah, we know the area, let's do it. And so it's funny that that's kind of the story of how we originally got to Asheville in that way. But and then just kind of kept on extending and really kind of fell in love with the place over time.
Oh, that's cool. So what about Asheville makes it the place that you want to stay?
uh, there's so first of all, like there's a nice culture here. It's a nice sort of in a lot of places open-mindedness. Um, there's good beer. There's things to do. And a lot of good people here, and so we kind of started expanding our circle recently. And there's a lot of art and music and kind of markets things to do. Just kind of go out and about. Not to mention, like there's also a lot of nature, like just around the area, right? So, between starting, 15, 20 minutes in the car, you get on the Blue Ridge Parkway, a bunch of hiking, bunch of trails, bunch of waterfalls, things to do in that way as well.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Nice balance.
So you're still remote work. We'll talk about that in a second. If people are interested in coming here, like, are you comfortable with the actual local economy? If you got booted out of your remote job, do you feel like you could survive if you actually had to get a job here?
That's a good question. I I think, to be honest, I didn't really look so much at tech companies in the area. I feel like there's enough to where I feel like I'd be able to find a job. I don't know if I would have my pick of the litter, if that makes sense. I think I'd be able to find a job and sustain myself. I don't know if there would be as much variety as there is with remote
So
or in other areas.
are you planning for the rest of your career while you're here to keep doing like remote work, actually working for somebody outside of the area?
The first part, while you're here, I think is the real question for me. I don't know how long I'll be here, I guess, right. So recently I joined a remote first company. So there is an office in California, but most people are remote. And I plan on being with them for a while. I think I will miss going to an office at some point. I think I would like to have an office to go to at some point. I miss a bit of that interaction and the spontaneity and kind of ad hoc conversations that happen that you can't really book on a calendar and a Zoom call. So I think at some point I would want to go back to that. But in the meantime, the location independentness of remote work makes it so that you can choose where you want to live before you choose where you want to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So with that, so you're with a remote first company. One of my questions is, because I thought for your generation it was culture, 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 culture. All I fucking heard for 15 years is culture. And now all of you guys are remote working and culture doesn't seem to matter. I mean, if it's remote first, is there actually a company culture, or is the company culture very mercenary? I suppose maybe that is a culture. I don't know.
I would argue it is. No, I think that I would say yes. I think even a company with no quote unquote no culture is a culture, but I don't even know how you'd get to know culture, right? I think, to me, it's funny. One of the ways that I kind of categorized the company in my head after I joined was by looking at the Slack channels, right? So how do people talk? What channels are there? Do they respond with the gifts? What gifts? You know what I mean? So I think you're right in that culture is now, I don't know, maybe it's e-culture now, right? Because a lot of it does just happen online. But I think that, I would still say that that's a culture for sure.
I mean, it is a culture,
depending on.
Yeah. But that's where I just wonder, because like I read the management books now, and again, what I'm told you're supposed to do as a manager, it's like you're supposed to be their boss and their priest and their therapist and their drill sergeant, and give them a cookie when they stub their toe. Like, apparently that's what I look. I'm reading. That's what they say. So do you? Was that all crap? Was that all garbage for 15 years, or?
No, 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 no. I I think that those things aren't mutually exclusive though. I mean, I can't give you a cookie right now, via the webcam, but like, I still have one-on-one meetings with my manager. And if he wanted to, and if I wanted him to be, he could be my therapist and my sarge and and whatever, you know. I do think that there comes a certain amount of independentness and again, kind of the self starter. I don't know that I like that term, but kind of that like self initiative maybe to be able to take on things and kind of try and pick a direction for yourself more so than uh, more so than everyone being in a room and saying and kind of someone delegating or splitting up tasks in that way, I guess. So that probably contributes a bit to the culture in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And then with your bosses, do they are there systems that they at least tangentially track you with? Because I don't know what it was, 6 months, a year ago, Microsoft came out with a product I thought was awesome. Apparently, I'm wrong. It was this product that allowed bosses for Office 365. They could drill down and see like the basic metrics on time usage on Outlook and Exchange or on Excel and PowerPoint and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was awesome. And then everybody told me I was a freaking moron. Anyways, so do your bosses have like any kind of not hyper spy system, but can they actually track how much you're actually working, or how do they know you're doing your job? I guess.
So that's I think that's an excellent question. I think that's one that I can't 100% answer here. So, like for example, what you're talking about, the tracking stuff, it doesn't surprise me that I haven't heard of it. So I'm not going to say backfired, but it doesn't surprise me that people didn't take a liking to it. To me, that is the equivalent of butts and seats means you're getting your work done, right? Everyone's seeing Office Space. I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday. Uh, you know, there are ways to get your work done without your butt in the seat, without you physically being with, Visual Studio Code at the forefront of your computer. So to me, systems like that they're not very good at tracking if you're doing your job. They're probably pretty good at tracking if you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
So for example, what you're asking, like, how do people know that you're doing your job? I think it depends on a bit of the output. And I think there have been many books also written about this. I don't know that there is a way to know. I think that, you know, I once worked for someone who judged programmers' outputs by how many lines of code they wrote, which is a horrible way to do things, right? Because I could just put in a new line between like all of my statements if I wanted to and like spread things out. That's not how code works. And it's not even just how many commits you do or how many pull requests, because is it good code? And that's uh, that's a bit of a subjective question. Also, really hard to know. To me, good code means it's future proof. You can't know if it's future proof. I mean, you can kind of tell, but the best way to know is wait for the future and see if you could build on it properly. I think that knowing I think that is a dilemma with the with moving from the industrial workforce, right, to kind of the creative, right. Uh, if you're working in a factory, yeah, there's an easy way to measure if you're doing your job right, how many widgets, gadgets, units you're producing per hour, whatever, and is the quality good. With some of this more creative knowledge work is what it's called. Some of this knowledge work, it's hard to put a number on that because it's a lot more creative and intangible than just how many things you can produce. I don't
And
know. Did
with
that answer your question?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And with that though, like an interesting thing is like when you're in the office, it's really easy to kind of get an idea where you are in the hierarchy, where you are in the herds of chickens or whatever. How do you find that being online? Because there is something psychological, like knowing you may not be the best, but at least you're not the freaking worst. You're not the slowest, right? Do you
The
feel
pecking order.
like, yeah, the pecking? Do you feel like you understand what the pecking order is in this remote world? Do you think you know where you sit?
That's funny. That's a good question. I think it's a bit different because again, the company that I was at while we were traveling, I was there in person, and so you do kind of get a sense for that. When I was traveling, I maybe took half a step back to let someone else try and lead a bit while I wasn't physically present. Um, and so now joining a company, joining remote is quite different, right? Because you're right. You don't immediately get a sense of, okay, what's the pecking order here? You kind of, I think, pick it up over time in the way of like when you have certain meetings, when you talk to certain coworkers, you see kind of who is more outspoken and confident, and typically a lot of people point their questions to them. You see things like here's maybe something. My email is first initial last name at company, right? Some people have first name at company. They've been here a while, right? They've been here a while, so maybe that's it's not explicitly, of course, if you have first name, then like, but it means that they've at least been here a while, and so they might know a bit more of what they're talking about. Um, when I browse through code, I can see who committed different pieces of code. So if I see one name pop up all over the place, this person's been around and they probably know what they're talking about when it comes to this piece of code or how the application works under the hood.
Oh, interesting. And then with the whole working thing, like I know one of the issues, there was a counterintuitive problem because it's kind of weird. Like everybody acts like remote work is like this new freaking thing. It's like remote work, and this crap has been around. Like it was stable 15 years ago, and I still remember. I thought 10 years ago we were all going to remote work, and then it didn't turn out that way. But
Mhm.
one of the counterintuitive issues was that a lot of companies were finding that their workers were actually working too hard, that they actually started to have more burnout because one of the problems, like with your generation, my generation at this point, is just like you have a wife now and you have a dog and you have a life, but a lot of people don't. And so the only thing in their life is work. And so if the only thing you have in work is you start working 12-hour days and then you do that, 100 days in a row and then you burn out. Have you seen any of those kinds of problems? Do you run, even being married, do you run into that kind of problem where you start working actually too much?
um, let me catch my train of thought here. Um, I haven't come across that problem too much. My problem is that my job is my hobby. My problem is that I like coding in my spare time. Typically, I just do side projects or other things like that. That's where sometimes the wife and myself butt heads, right? Because oh, well, you worked all day. Well, now I'm working on my own stuff. That's different. I think there is, and so that I've kind of learned to draw the line. I think it's good to have separation, both. So for example, when we were traveling, I liked to find a co-working spot where we were, and I'd get a month-long membership for how typically we were there for a month, and I would leave in the morning. I'd go to the co-working spot, and I'd go back home in the afternoon. And to me, that was a bit of physical physical separation of, okay, I'm at the co-working spot, I'm now working. I'm at home, I'm not working. And so, like, for example, now when I actually work from home and not from a co-working spot or anything, I do have my personal machine next to my work machine. So when the time comes, when I feel like I've accomplished enough for the day, uh, I will shut down my work machine, potentially open up my personal machine if there's something I want to do, something I want to check. I think it's good to have that actual separation. I think it is hard. Again, it kind of comes with that self management of like actually trying to do that. On my phone, I have a folder of icons with all work stuff. I don't get any notification. That's not true. I get notifications for meetings 10 minutes before, and Slack notifications only if I'm explicitly tagged. So, I don't, so there's a bit more of that kind of separation of, I don't feel the urge to constantly be, I think I never check my work email on my phone, or Slack really, because I don't need to.
So you're doing the co-working thing when you're traveling. Have you thought about doing the
Yeah,
co-working thing here for space or?
I actually have. I would like to take a closer look at that. There are a good couple options around Asheville, and so um, I don't know how picky I should be. Can I bring my dog? Because I'm sure he'd love to. I'm sure he'd love to hang out at the co-working spot. And I do have meetings sometimes, so it'd be good if I could be in a place where I could speak like at a normal voice and it'd be okay and not bother other people without me having to book a conference room, for example.
Right.
So, things like that are things that I look for. I started taking a look into it. I haven't finished, but it's something that I would like to go back into. Again, kind of get out of the house a bit, you know, different, different environment, different landscape, and be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you actually have good productivity there? Because I've tried co-working. My productivity goes to crap. Like when I'm home, I just in silence, tippy tapping away. I can tap for hours and hours. When I go, it just seems like there's so much going on around me. Like I feel like I'm an employee again. Like you punched a clock. Like I was here for 8 hours. No, I didn't get shit done, but I was
I'm done.
here, damn it. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, you feel the same way. Like if you're at a coffee shop or something, you don't work at a coffee shop.
No, no, I'll read a book or no, I wouldn't actually do any. Like when I
Yeah.
do, I just
Yeah.
focus and yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think I think some that is definitely how some people operate. For me, I kind of like that uh, coffee shop chatter background noise a bit going on.
Mm.
And then I put my headphones on, I turn my music up, and I can like, you know, get in my zone and get in the element and kind of get work done. Uh, Obviously, it's not for everyone. To me, it's not an everyday thing, but I definitely enjoy that every now and then. And it kind of helps me. Again, I have my way of like headphones, music. I can kind of try and get in the zone a bit like that.
And so with the company that you're at now, so it's a remote first company. So how did you get hired? Like how did you find the job? What was the interview process like? How did you onboard? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I was interviewing for a while. I wasn't in a rush to leave the previous company. Um, Maybe I was getting a bit antsy, but so I went to Stack Overflow jobs, stackoverflow.com/jobs. They have a lot of really good stuff there and some good filtering mechanisms as well. So if you want to take a look at, there's literally a checkbox that says remote only, I believe. And you kind of look at what tickles your fancy in the way of position, technology they work, what the company actually does, the title, things like that. Um, so I applied to a few companies. The developers here would be familiar with Leet Code, potentially LEET code.com, which is pretty much a way of practicing kind of algorithms and some of the fundamentals of computer science. A lot of the larger companies default to those types of questions in order to assess your ability and see kind of where you fall on the scale. The current company I'm at, what I prefer is when a company would give you like a take-home assignment. Say, all right, here, clone this Git repository and read the README and go through the exercise that they're giving you, and you have a week, and push it up to a forked repository, and we'll take a look and give you feedback. So to me, that's a nice kind of a bit more fair way in the way of like see how you work, see what kind of work you can produce. You could do it a bit on your own time, and you're not under the microscope. You're not having to necessarily do things with them, watching over your shoulder, which could be quite pressure inducing, as one could imagine. And so, then you have to, it's cool too, because you get to make these decisions for the take home test and then you have to defend them, right? So you present your solution to them. They say, okay, why did you do this way instead of this? Okay, it was more efficient, or I thought that maybe if we build it in this way in the future, it could help make that easier. for example. You need to create tests. So that's kind of what I did for this company and a few others. Yeah.
And with that, though, how do you know it's not a scam? Like the most amazing scam in the world. This is awesome. I wish I had come up with it. But apparently, what I guess a lot of these companies are doing is they have problems, and so they then say that they're hiring, put their problems for you people to solve. You solve the problem, and then they're like, "Oops, we don't actually have the job for you." They just take your work and run. Like, how do you know you're not going to get scammed that way?
Yeah. uh, so like, for example, there are sites like glassdoor.com, which is pretty good. You could, so people interviewing these companies or people working at these companies can leave reviews. So, well, like a glass door, right? So kind of a peek inside the company. So, there, I did come across some companies where they, uh, they sent me like they sent me a take home test. I spent like a good amount of time, and then they just said, sorry, we don't like it, but they weren't specific about it. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Now, I wish I did spend some time looking deeper at their Glassdoor reviews, because actually, had it said there were a lot of people that said they won't give you any feedback on this assignment. So hopefully, hopefully some of that transparency and some of that review would help weed out some of those bad actors in the ecosystem. I've heard of people. I've heard of that happening as well. It's just unfortunate, and this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And then, okay, so you do the tests, and then like, what does the interview process look like? Is it basically just a Zoom call? How do they feel if you've got the right mojo or whatnot?
Yeah. So it was like a Zoom call or something similar, but I shared my screen and had my code pulled up. And so again, it was a take home test that I had done over the course of a week or something. I pulled it up, and then I share my screen, and then they say, okay, cool. So go to this file, go to this line. Why did you do this? Why did you implement it like that? And I kind of have to defend some of the decisions I made along the way. And then, there might be some questions about background, some behavioral stuff, right? Like, tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with a coworker. Certain kind of questions like that. It's a process. It's funny because I went through it recently, so I have a lot of recent experience, I guess. But I think it's a process, and I think that you start with some of the companies you're maybe not so interested in at first, and kind of get the experience. I think the only real way to get experience is to actually be under the microscope and to be put through those experiences and interviews, and it kind of helps you get a bit more familiarized with the process, as well as more confident with some of your answers along the way.
Okay. And do you think noobs could get hired at remote first companies? Like, obviously, you've got experience and you've got all that. But I mean, I think about myself. It's funny because everybody thinks like I'm insulting them. I remember when I went to the interview and the guy said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Computers." The reason I make that joke is because I fucking did it. And that's what I wonder. Like, I think about myself when I was new. And if you just plot me in a computer, like it was hard enough. My first corporate job, our main boss was 1,000 miles away, but I still had to come to a company and deal with people. I can't
Yeah.
imagine just being plopped at this desk as an 18-year-old and said, okay, do 8 hours of work. Like, what?
Yeah, yeah, like that's quite intimidating. You know, I the question of can noobs get remote jobs? I think absolutely. You know, I've worked with people, not necessarily noobs, but I've worked with people that have come out of like coding boot camps. A few people, one who have gotten jobs at places like Facebook or other FANG companies or other places that I've worked, just come out of coding boot camps and then and got a nice job out of there. Now that is a thing. And also we come, I mean, you know this, you built your career on this, but we come in, we live in an age where education on the internet is you could find anything you want, right? There's no excuse to be ignorant if you want to learn about something, right? If you want to learn about something, you could find it. And so I think it's a question of do you really want it? And if so, then there are plenty of resources, a lot of which are free, especially I think, in the tech world. There's a big open source community. There's a big push for a lot of these things being free, as well as, of course, there are paid options, if that's interesting. But there are ways to kind of ramp yourself up into a career in IT, into tech, and into some of these companies. You don't have to have a computer science background. You need to be able to write good code. That will be a requirement. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Do the job. Do the job. And so
Yeah.
you brought up the boot camps. I think a lot of times people talk about boot camps and you see a lot of success bias. Like the people that got hired at Facebook, it's like, look, you can get hired. And it's like one out of like 50 people. And you're like, yeah, what happened to the other 49? Like as an
Okay.
actual
You,
coder
you
in your,
you don't hear those stories, right?
yeah. How do you feel? Or I mean, are they as good as they're made out to be? Do you think a lot of these boot camps or?
Look, I think I'm biased because I did get a degree in computer science, undergraduate, so I come from one of these two angles, right? Now, I think that a degree in computer science helps solidify a lot of the foundation when you're looking and when you're working on some of these things, right? So when it comes to some of these algorithms or understanding what's going on behind the scenes is also very helpful in the way of efficiency or memory. Or again, future proofing, right? So being exposed to a lot more of this helps you long term, I think. Now, I do think I have seen very smart, very capable developers come out of coding boot camps. And I think that over time they start to grasp some of those fundamentals as well that helps them build upon it. I'm trying to come off as unbiased, yeah.
So then you liked your college degree because actually one of the things I've heard from quite a few people is unfortunately college degrees you're actually learning crap that's 5 to 10 years behind the times. Do you actually find your college degree to be because you have a CS degree, right? Is that actually
Correct.
good? Yeah.
Correct. That's funny because yeah, you're right. You're right in that coming out of that, I wasn't very happy with it. They taught the main language they taught was Java, and there was one class about in C, I think, which Java is used in the real world today, but it's not as like prominent as it used to be. There were a lot of things that we didn't learn, like there was no web development, which
No
I
web
mean
development.
there was like one class and it was basic HTML and CSS, but I wanted web application development, and they didn't have some of this basic stuff. Now, again, in my previous answer, I mentioned the computer science degree and I mentioned the fundamentals, right, and the kind of foundation. And so I'll stand by that and say that there are courses, automata, algorithms. What is it? I took electrical engineering, like binary logic, right? A lot of this stuff does actually contribute to your long-term developing and software development. But when it comes to real-world experience, that is where I felt that my program lacked specifically. Now, again, because programming was my hobby and I did a lot of things outside of the classroom that kind of gave me some of that real-world experience, building mobile applications or building web applications, and that kind of helped adjust for that. But you're right in the way that if you would have asked me right out of school, like how do you feel about that degree now, I didn't feel great about it at the time in the way of like actually helping me be job ready, I guess.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So then what, like, so in coding, right, there's 1,000 different languages. So when you get hired or what you got hired for, like, what is your skill set that's actually valuable? Not all the fluff you put in a resume, but what do you basically get paid for knowing?
Yeah, sure. So, I think you've talked about this with Liam as well on your show. But like a lot of the different languages, a lot of it is the syntax is different, and yeah, there are definitely things under the hood that make things different as well. But you get paid for kind of solving these problems, solving intangible problems in a creative, and I'll use this term again, future-proof and efficient way. Um, you know, you develop software is very intangible. It's hard to really, it's hard to kind of grasp it, and that's why it's really hard to actually find a diagramming tool that can really show you everything you need to know about a specific application, right? And so I think that there's a lot of problem solving that comes into play in the way of looking at a big system. A lot of times legacy, a lot of times something that you didn't write, and you need to figure out how to make it do something. I work with someone now who says, let's limit the blast radius. let's change it as little as possible to make our thing work, but make it work in a way where it meets the specifications and is good quality, right? So it can't touch other things, it can't degrade the efficiency, and again, ideally, you can build on it again for the future. And notice how I didn't mention any programming language there, right? You have to do that in whatever programming language you work in.
Okay. What programming language though do you think is valuable now? Like what would you invest in?
Yeah, so at the moment, Node.js, which is a JavaScript library, is quite popular. So Node.js is a library, and then TypeScript as well is like kind of a flavor of JavaScript that helps make it harder, like hard typed in the way where it would help prevent bugs down the road, which obviously is a good thing. I think JavaScript, Node, TypeScript is a good place to be. I've seen a lot of companies hiring now with Ruby on Rails. That was kind of the hot stuff 5 years ago.
Yeah, I have seen that. What the hell is going on?
Yeah,
Ruby was like everybody's Ruby back in like 2015, and then it died.
right.
Didn't hear crap about it. And now,
Yeah,
like, yeah, within the past month, I have been hearing more and more about Ruby. Like, what is that?
yeah. So me too. And I think my guess is that it was, the hot stuff back like 5 years ago, and then what has happened is like a bunch of people kind of took it on, started playing around with it, and we've reached the, I don't know, age of matriculation, where a lot of the toys and tools people were building are actually spinning up into their own companies. And so now, and because that's when they started, is when it was hot new stuff. Now we have Ruby on Rails. That's my theory. Yeah, take it or leave it.
So the last of the formal questions, and then we'll take something from the peanut gallery. So we've got Joel here. So anybody at home or wherever the hell you are that's watching this, there's a link down below for the Zoom link if you want to join the Zoom meeting and ask a question for Digital Nomad. Come on now, I'm getting you a Digital Nomad. I expect some damn questions. So anyways, click on the Zoom link, join, and ask your questions. Hopefully Joel has something here. So one of the things that I saw on your resume that I thought was interesting is because you're relatively young, right? You're like 28-ish.
Yeah.
And you have like CTO experience. I also think this is a very interesting thing with the younger generation. Like I never even thought about being a CTO until I was like 45 or something. But like people now are CEOs or CTOs. What qualifies you as a CTO? Like when you say you're a CTO, what does that actually mean? What gives you that title other than the person sitting here? It's a business card.
Yeah, that's a good question. A funny way to put it. Like I could see, yeah. So let me go back. during school, let me go back even further. I no, I always kind of wanted to build my own things. And at some point, I realized that I would be building my own things through software because it's a great medium to do it in. And and so when I was in school, I kind of got hit with the entrepreneurship bug and started a couple things again. Programming is my hobby, and so me and some student peers of mine just started up a couple companies. And so one of them we did like a ride sharing service before Uber and Lyft were everywhere. We started a ride sharing service at our school, and wanted to turn it into a real thing. And so, me and a friend at the time, we kind of gave ourselves the title. I was CTO, he was CEO. I enjoy being much more technical than anything else. So I was happy to take the bullet of CTO. And I think I think the meaning very much differs based on the scale of what you're working on, right? So that was just a startup at the time, a couple of us at college. And so for me, it was like, all right, I'm gonna take the technical direction of like, I'm gonna take the lead with code. I'm gonna make some of these long-term decisions in the way of like what payment processor we use, things like that. And I think the role kind of grows from there. To me, it is about though long-term thinking, and like even at large companies, it's like it would be some of that long-term thinking. I think I obviously haven't been CTO at a large company, but I'd imagine that's maybe some of what their job includes.
Oh, did you ever have like imposter syndrome or anything like being CTO? I just find it very, like I say, I'm just the older, I'm Gen X or whatever. And like titles are so much more fluid than they used to be. Like we were
Yeah,
like very like I remember that like when I was dealing with the startup world and you had all those CEOs running around with like one employee. And like I never even conceived of being, or at least calling myself a CEO until I had like 200 employees. Like every
right,
CEO that actually called himself a CEO had like 200 employees or $50 million in revenue. And
right.
then something happened about 10 years ago where person's running around with one employee and he's CEO. Um,
Yeah.
are you were you comfortable with that? Is that a generational thing, or did you feel imposter syndrome, or you didn't even think about it? It's really just what old people think about.
It's funny that you mentioned that because thinking back, I don't think I ever had imposter syndrome as CTO, but I probably do have more imposter syndrome now than I did with that title. Like I don't know. I guess maybe it's because that was our own venture, right? So we knew what we were doing. We knew this is what we're doing. This is our mission. We're going to do what we can. And I mean, you're right in the way that like titles are pretty fluid these days. And so I didn't really care. I don't think I cared at the time, but I just wanted to like build stuff. Now I'm at a company. I actually have to like actually have to like produce results that other people are seeing, not just me and a fellow student of mine. But now it's like, okay, I get more imposter syndrome now these days, I think, than back then.
Oh, that's
So that's
funny.
funny. I never thought about it like that.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, we're gonna open this up to anybody who wants to come on. I've got a real digital nomad. Real digital nomad. You can ask a question. Traveled around, doing his work in India, Sri Lanka, all kinds of places. So there's a Zoom link down below. There's a Zoom link in the chat section if you want to join this. Apparently, 7 o'clock at night is not the time to do these. This is
All
so
right.
quiet. Oh, Joel, do you have a question? The one person in attendance. Do you have a question, Joel? Let's start riffing on random questions pretty soon here. Is Joel there? Joel,
He
buddy.
did. He did put a comment in the chat here.
Yeah, so what did Joel say in the comment? Regarding Office 365 productivity metrics, this is a conversation I had with my manager back when that story came out. We use applications that draw a lot of time outside of O365 space, but the real message I got back, which reflects our pandemic work from home policy, is that so long as the work gets done, there's little care about time management. What I did learn, and I believe this was reflected in Eli's commentary on the subject, is checking in to identify barriers. The challenge of work from home is how remote technology can be a barrier itself and how barriers need to be explicitly identified to be known by decision makers. Yeah, that's one of my things with the whole surveillance management is, I don't know. If you've actually had employees, a lot of times employees don't tell you what the fuck problems they're having. Like, you're more than happy to write a check. It's like, oh, you need a new computer, you need something, just write a check. I'm paying you too much money to worry about this, but then they will keep their mouth shut. You'll be like, hello, is there a problem? Like, why aren't you doing your job? Oh, well, I need another $1,000. Why the fuck did you ask me that? And I think that's one of the things that I find interesting about this whole concept of like the surveillance management is, again, there is this weird, like, in the modern world, like, people don't want managers the same, or a lot of people don't. Like, management is a position, and there's a lot of things that they're trying to do, and it's kind of curious, like, how you figure that out from in a work from home environment. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've never been one to maybe shy away as much from having that conversation with the manager. I think they try and be very open about it in some of the positions I've been in, right? So they try and set up recurring one-on-one meetings with you, and it's always on the calendar. If you don't have questions for something, then you could say, "Hey, I don't have anything for you." But again, some of the positions I've been in, there's always something on the calendar where you could say, "Okay, like, uh, I'm having trouble with this. What about these meetings? Or I'm having too many meetings. I don't want to do this anymore." And it is a bit of a bi-directional street, I think, right? They do expect you to produce results, but at the same time, it's okay for you to ask of them, like, I don't like this meeting, or I don't know, I want to work on a different story, or I want to switch teams, something like that. Um, yeah.
Ooh, we got somebody. Nathan. Nathan, do you have a question?
Do you eat pineapple on your pizza?
Oh, do you just have a bad connection, or are you spamming this? The connection was so bad, I honestly don't know if that was spam or a real question. Can you repeat that, Nathan?
I think there's bad connection, so I'll just stay muted.
Oh, crap.
That
It
connection.
was a real question, but a bad connection. Oh well. Let's see. Joel, is Joel still there? Is Joel still there? Got a question? Okay. Well, no questions for the peanut gallery now. Okay, so I have a question for you. Oops, I missed somebody. So I guess one of the big things for people with your generation is apparently finding a significant other. How did you find a woman to marry? Did you go to a store and swipe a credit card? No, it's like insane. Oh, I don't know what it is. I've been off my own little world for like a decade. And so I haven't dealt with 20. I like just haven't dealt with 20-year-olds in like 10 years. And like I started dealing with 20-year-olds again. And oh my God, some of these people are so depressing. Just so depressing. Like, and the whole thing, like with relationships, like, so how did you find a relationship and do the whole marriage?
I mean, I don't know. That's the $1,000,000 question, right? um, I got lucky. I'll say the first cliche thing. I was never very good at meeting people in person. I'm an introvert, a bit of a geek. I met my current wife through an app, Coffee Meets Bagel, which is a very funny name for an app, I think. But it worked. We're proof. We met. We knew pretty early on that we were the ones for one another. Again, because we both kind of have that international background, it kind of made sense. We both kind of fell in love with the idea of just like of traveling indefinitely, and at the time indefinite for an undetermined amount of time. And that's kind of, I guess the rest is history. I got off really lucky in that way.
Did you have any weird social? I don't know. Everybody's like going about these red pills and blue pills and all that kind of stuff. Did you have any weird psychology? I mean, I don't get what's going on.
I don't think so. Like treat people with respect. I at the time my psychology was I judged first dates by how many beers we got without worrying about the conversation getting awkward. If you have one beer and you're like, I need to go, and like Michelle and I had 3 beers our first date because the conversation kept flowing, and so to me that was like silly indicator, but an indicator nonetheless.
Oh, fair enough. So we have Nelson here. Does Nelson have a question? He has a video.
Hi, Nelson.
Hello, greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Tomer, I have a question because I'm Portuguese, and I heard that. Where were you in Portugal? This is a curiosity. Where were you? I come from the south.
Yeah, we were in Lisbon, and we did a weekend trip to Porto.
Okay, you weren't in my hometown, but I forgive you. I forgive you for that.
Next time around.
Okay. Thanks a lot. No, I just want to thank Eli and for you for sharing your story, and thank you for giving back to the community, because this history of the digital nomads and all that, I already shared a little bit of my story because I follow Eli for some years now, and it's I'm a little bit older than you. I'm on my early 40s, but it was exactly because I separated from my girlfriend that I turned in sort of a digital nomad, because I was happily living in my country, and then I moved over to Germany for 2.5 years, and I've lived in 4 cities in Germany. That's also a way of being a nomad. Mm-hmm. And I'm not happy with my current employer, and I'm having calls. They want me to go to Switzerland to work in Liechtenstein, and and for a couple of years I would say no and all that, but why not? So thanks a lot, and I hope that the next time you go to Portugal, you visit the Algarve. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Nelson.
Ciao.
Yeah, that's a nice thing with the Europeans. They have that frickin' the Shinza, so they can go to all these places. They can do Spain and Portugal and Italy, and
it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, you get off the plane and you just kind of like walk out the door. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, here you can either go to the North Carolina suburb or the Texas suburb or the Maryland suburb. It's not quite the same thing.
A lot of suburb options though.
No, lots of suburb options. So while George is coming in, is George coming in? Yeah, he's joining. So question. So you did college, so you got your bachelor's degree. Are you going to continue with college? Do you see a value in master's or PhD?
Potentially, again, because of I'm a bit entrepreneurial and business minded. I had thought about the idea of an MBA at some point, potentially. But it's not something that I'm really in a rush to do. Right now I'm a cog in the wheel. I'm a developer for a company, and I like the nitty gritty. Right now I'm happy taking orders. It'll probably be a tiny little bit before I'm comfortable and ready to give them. Maybe then.
So that's interesting, because that's one of the things I try to tell people, and they tell me I'm stupid. Like, I actually point people to the MBA. I actually think the Juris Doctor and the MBA are probably the 2 best ways to get into technology now. So what's your decision with getting an MBA? Why not, masters in computer science or engineering or something like that?
Yeah, getting a master's and PhD in computer science is an option, and then you just kind of specialize more and more. For me, long term, I think I don't think I'm entirely over the entrepreneurship era in my life. I think at some point I would want to start something, company of my own, product, something like that. And I think that an MBA would be, I have a good amount of tech savvy, and I think some business savvy and some people savvy would probably do me good, more good if I wanted to start something than more specialized tech education, I guess.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. We got Gregory Mitt. Does Gregory Mitt have a question? Also, anybody at home, the links are down below if you want to join the Zoom call. Ask a real digital nomad a question. I feel like a huckster at like a carnival. I've got a digital nomad right here. Come see the digital nomad.
Guess his height.
Guess his height. There you go. Gregory, what's your question?
So, Eli, I'm a huge fan from Brazil.
Cool.
So, great job with office hours. So, I am a system administrator for 14 years, and I want to transition to more DevOps role. And in my company, I don't have this opportunity, so I'm looking for some remote job outside Brazil, maybe in a US company. So I would like some suggestions to what I could do to get this job.
You want me to go, Eli, or you want to
go? Yeah. You're in that world right now. Are you like?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for coming on, Gregory. Thanks for your question. So I think there's a couple things you could do. There are, as I mentioned, Stack Overflow job board, which is pretty good. There are also job boards that are exclusively remote jobs. I think one is called We Work Remotely. Another is called Remote OK. I'm sure if you just type those into Google, you'll be able to find those, or you could probably just search for remote job board. And I think there's a lot of DevOps positions. I'd imagine there's a lot of DevOps positions that are remote friendly. Everyone deals with infrastructure remote with DevOps. You didn't share entirely your experience with DevOps. So, ideally, you'd want to come into it with some experience. I think a lot of DevOps positions, I don't know that they're really entry positions. I think that people pivot into DevOps from either development or maybe from IT. So I don't know how much cloud you typically work with, but if you have some experience there, that'd be good. And then again, I mentioned, there's a lot of educational resources online. One that I know is very good is called A Cloud Guru. So I think it's acloud.guru is the URL. Again, a quick Google search will turn that up. They do a lot of courses on cloud infrastructure. So if you're interested in a specific cloud like AWS, Amazon's Web Services, or Google Cloud or Azure, if you're impartial, I'd probably stick to either AWS or Azure. I wouldn't worry about Google. They do a lot of certifications, so you could go through a course of theirs, get a certification. Would probably help credentials once you do apply to some of those jobs. Would probably help you stick out on your application, on your resume.
All right.
That's interesting. So, what is your definition of DevOps? It's kind of interesting. DevOps is one of those things. I thought I knew what the definition was, and then everybody argues about what it is. Like when you think about DevOps, what do you think about the definition?
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I think for me as a system administrator, the DevOps world is more agile, and more focus in infrastructure as code. In my actual role today, I have to do a lot of manual stuff because the company culture, people don't have standards and things like that. So adopt a DevOps culture is more complicated for me. So this is why I want to maybe get another job more fitting with my idea of growing in the IT world.
I mean, one of the things that I would say, like I advise a lot of people, is don't throw out your job until you need to. So, like if you want to get into DevOps, and so that's Python, Ansible, all that kind of stuff. One of the things to think about is just automating the systems that you have. So if you've been with this company for 14 years or a long time, you can probably automate and do a lot of things and basically get experience under their dime, and then put that on your resume, and then it looks a hell of a lot better, right? I've been with the company for X amount of years, and I've been doing Ansible, Python, blah, 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 blah. That'd be a thought. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great thought,
So your suggestion would be like go down in the certification path and at the same time trying to automate things in my current job.
Yeah, I think Tomer's saying like the certifications are good. I always say experience is like actually having on your resume is the one that's really the valuable thing. But Tomer,
That's a great point. I would definitely agree with Eli in the way that see what kind of DevOps you could do in your own job, and potentially even carve out a little niche for you there, doing what it is that you want to do, right? Automating infrastructure, especially if your company doesn't necessarily have high quality, having some of that repeatable infrastructure is crucial for resilience and sustainability. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
cool. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so Nelson's back. So Joel, Joel, we still haven't heard from Joel, right? Joel, you there yet? You there?
I am.
Oh,
Sorry, I was on the
there's
phone
Joel.
earlier.
No problem. So what's your question? What's going on?
I guess it would be a similar question to that what Gregory had, where I have full-time pensioned work, and it's not something I would ever throw out, really. And I guess I'm in the place where I'm not sure what my role would be there, except for what I'm currently doing, more of a holding pattern. And so I'm a workforce analyst. So so it's a lot of Microsoft SQL work, Access. They're using Tableau there now for a lot of the standardized tools, and I would consider just playing around with various hobbies and side hustles to off work hours to really just build that up. Wondering if there's any. I could very well provide extra information beyond this, but whether that's actually a reasonable strategy.
So wait, so you have a good job, like a pensioned job that you have, and then so are you trying to go to a new job, or are you just trying to get a side hustle? I'm a little confused on that bit.
I don't personally see much more advancement in my work unless I were to go into a true management position, have employees under me, and that's like the next step up would particularly be one that would have various set of responsibilities, and you know, overtime wouldn't exist because there would be something called management admin days, where it's 5 days of blue time instead of so if you do work more than the 37.5 hours a week, then you don't get paid extra for that. So like that's the challenge of if I were to go further, then that would be one of the things that the benefit is not there, I'd say.
Interesting. So you want to go from where you're at to like, what kind of company are you like looking for? Like what, like, yeah, where do you want to go then?
And I guess that's the part that I'm curious about is that I don't particularly know. It was something I chatted with my my manager about, is that, and to keep doing what I'm doing in making and building skills outside of the job actually would make more sense, just for the sake of sanity.
Yeah, fair enough. So where are you at in the world?
Nova Scotia, Canada.
No. Oh shit, Nova Scotia. So you're in the middle of nowhere then. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What's fun, Tomer? What should he do to save his sanity?
What's fun? That's funny. I think try and see what pulls you. Tech is a massive space. So is software. I think you said that you like to do some stuff on the side as well, right?
Correct. So one of the things I've been messing around with in the past year has been repacking lithium-ion battery packs, and I have a teleconference reselling thing on the side as well. So various little things that provide potential third, fourth, fifth, sixth income sort of deal.
Sure. I don't know. It doesn't sound like software. I don't know how much I can help you there in that way. Yeah, that sounds like something a bit more difficult to do remote for a company, unless you're kind of selling that, I guess, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, a lot of it would just be considered outside the tech field.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, if you're doing coding, I mean, Python is awesome in the IoT world. If you want to screw around a lot of things, like Azure services are amazing. So if you learn C#, I mean, because that's where I was doing all those videos until I realized nobody gave a damn. But like, you can do machine vision, you can do machine speak, you can do all this amazing stuff nowadays with just Python or C#. And so again, if you're just looking to, not be bored, I'd learn Python and start playing around with AWS and Azure if it was me, I think.
Indeed, I have one of those humidity, Humidex sensors that I think I borrowed some of your code to put together, and it's currently running up my shed because I wanted to check the difference between actual weather and how it's doing in there right now.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's all we got for it. I'm not. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't really much of a question, I guess, but it was going around, so I thought, pop in. As for the, I put in the comments regarding the Office 365 productivity metrics, and that was something I chatted with my manager with before, and he had pretty well the same conclusion as you had in the commentary video that you had back in the day, that it was in the news. And the challenge that our shop has for work from home is it's difficult to for a manager to go around and check in how people are doing and not being too stressed out. So
yeah.
I mean, so as an employee, I think those tools would be useful. It's just scary if it's something that was intended to be used as for a performance tool, and you do get to see that with Amazon drivers, for example.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the problems we run into with this is, again, what I dislike is that people mythologize like bosses and owners and managers. And these are all positions too. Like a warehouse worker has a role and a manager has a role. Like if the warehouse worker rolls over somebody with a forklift, they fucked up, right? It's not the forklift's fault. And I think that's where I get a little pissy with like these Office 365 tools is, yeah, if the manager is a dick, that's the manager being a dick. That's not the failure of the tool. Like the way that I look at it is it should be something to give the managers a better idea of what's going on. And then they need to do their job. And too many managers are just bad at their job. And so then it makes everything look horrible is my thought there. So
I think it also adds a bit to the culture, to me, in a bit of a negative way, because it kind of removes that sort of level of trust, right? Like if a manager is checking something like this often, then it shows that they don't necessarily have a lot of trust in the employees, in the way of like, I need to check on what applications you're using, kind of deal, right?
Yeah. Let's see. Gregory Mitt has his hand up. Yes, Gregory.
So Tomer mentioned that at the start of his career, he had some freelancing, right? So my question is, in a remote world, because the pandemic, how could someone stand out and get some freelancing work? Because I check out like Fiverr and other freelance websites. The competition there is wild, and if you are someone starting, how I can maybe stand out?
That's a great question. You're right. The competition is pretty tough, and a lot of times on sites like Upwork or something, it's a race to the bottom. It's not a race you want to be a part of or win, really. So one of the things I would say is tap into your network, tap into your local network, friends, family. Do you know anyone who owns a business? Do they need a website? Do they need a project done? Do they need some help? You could do something at a lower rate than you might charge otherwise, and then kind of hope that ask them to refer you to anyone else that might need more assistance, and kind of I would say tap into that network at first is where you could find some of your first clients and potentially start from there.
So after you start building a kind of portfolio, right?
Exactly.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean that's what I saw out of a lot of people, again, 5 or 6 years ago when they were doing the transition, is you really did. You had people going from 0 to 6 figures in a year. And most of them, what they did is they went to the meetups at the time and they just said, hey, what language do you need? They didn't give a damn. They're just like, what language are you paying for? They're like, Python or Ruby. Okay. And they go home and learn Ruby. They come back in a month and say, hey, I know a little Ruby. Can I get paid to do something? And then they get a little project and they finish it. Then 2 months later, they do a bigger project. And then in a year, they've actually got a job. And so I think that's one of my frustrations. Like everybody goes to Fiverr, but like, you just have to understand, it's like the psychology, the culture of anything. The culture of Fiverr is $5. Like that is literally the culture of Fiverr. You're not paying your mortgage off of Fiverrs. And so that's where you need to go to people that wouldn't even consider paying you $5. Like the thought of paying somebody $5 is just an anathema to them. So you go and build up experience.
That's also a case that, in terms of meetups, that I've experienced with, I think it was data science meetups where there would be presentations, but there was also just be a ton of networking at the end, and the passing out of business cards and stuff like that.
Yeah. Meetups are great, especially now that we can sort of do them again. Nelson has a hand up, and then I guess we'll wrap it up for the night because we've actually been talking for about 2 hours now. Nelson, what's going on?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks a lot. I have a question to Tomer, and I'd like to say hello to my Portuguese-speaking brother from Brazil, Gregory. Aquele abraço, irmão. We say that the Portuguese who are in Brazil, they speak Portuguese with sugar. It's a funny thing, and it's a thing because I wanted to ask Tomer about SQL because it's funny about DevOps because I just resigned from a company where I was trying to do some DevOps, and the guys, I do a little bit of system administration. And whenever I try to come up with automatization ideas and all that, the management looked at me as I was a sort of a lunatic, and I was working really long hours because nothing is. We had almost no automatization, and they didn't want it. So I'm leaving the company, and I'm going to go do IT support. I'm going to go a step back. And I'm going to earn more money doing IT support, and I can go and concentrate on developing some. For example, I didn't manage to get a job in a bank doing DevOps. I have the sysadmin skills and all that. The problem was the type of SQL that for the customization of the databases and all that. And they gave me a recipe that was, I needed to get a little bit better on my SQL. So I don't know if Tomer could give me some pointers on resources for SQL, for database management and for SQL. Okay, because it is funny how sometimes you are in a path, your management isn't listening to you. You talk about, and it's funny that you said that you shouldn't invest in Google, and it is exactly a Google workspace environment. They don't want to they don't want no automatization, and I have to go and do something else because they don't. If I want to grow in DevOps and everybody is working in DevOps, they're not listening. So some words about SQL, if you please, Tomer. Thank
you. Sure. I'm not too familiar with a whole lot of resources necessarily, specifically about SQL. One thing to check out is maybe it's called W3 Schools. If they have some, I know they do some web development stuff. I'm not sure specifically about SQL. Yeah. I think there's Free Code Camp as well as supposed to be a good resource. Again, I can't talk specifically to SQL. And if you're looking about certain like database infrastructure, I would recommend, again, a cloud guru is good for that. That's less about the language SQL specifically, and more so about, standing up databases on Google or AWS or Azure, things like that.
Cloud guru, something like that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right, cool. So we've been chatting for about 2 hours, so I will let you go, get to be with your dog and your wife and your beer. My final question, though, this is just kind of whatever in the back. Why don't you care about Google? I find that fascinating. So AWS, you sure? Like I could see if you said don't care about DigitalOcean, I'd be like, okay, fair. But like Google, like what is the to Google?
Sure, maybe I spoke too soon. You know, they have a lot of customers. They offer a lot of similar equivalent services, alternatives to AWS and Azure. If you're someone who is on the job market, you know, you to me, I guess you want to be as relatable to certain positions as you can, and AWS and Azure currently on the market much more than Google does. So they're the top two players. Google is third. So to me, you know, you mentioned as well, like having experience takes the cake, and so experience to me in AWS or Azure potentially could get you more opportunity than experience in Google. Is maybe how I should put it, if that helps.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, no, it is interesting. Like, it's weird. It's Google, but you never hear about it. It's like AWS or Azure. I think I hear about DigitalOcean more than I hear about Google, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Any final thoughts for the peanut gallery out there? Any thoughts on becoming a digital nomad or the future of tech or whatever? From you? Do you have any final thoughts?
Just, you know, thanks for putting this together. Thanks for inviting me. It's awesome to be here and to be featured. So I really appreciate it, and enjoyed our conversation, this and all the ones previous as well. So
Cool. Well, it's good having you. So yes, this was Tomer. We did the whole digital nomad thing. His LinkedIn is down below and all that. Again, we are doing these meetup things. So I'm using Meetup in order to schedule the office hours. So our next office hours is going to be on Thursday at 2:00, and that will just be me, and I will just answer your questions. There'll be no guest. Hopefully next Tuesday we will have a guest. I'm not quite sure who the guest is yet, but I've got a whole pile of me. I've got so damn many meetings. It's like one of those, you're like, oh, this is gonna be fun, and then I'm drinking so much coffee. So I don't know, hopefully we'll have somebody else next Tuesday and the next Tuesday and the next Tuesday, and we'll keep doing this. So sign up for the meetup, and yeah, and so with that, I'm gonna kick everybody out. You, Tomer, stay, and everybody else, I will see you folks at the next show. So see y'all later.